Welcome again. This is Bren Javasi, owner and operator of Level 3, and this is the second part of our multi-part tutorial on the use and operation of the Level 3 Texture Vault. In this tutorial, we'll be discussing the major operation of the Vault, why it may be useful to you, and give you an overview of some of the more advanced features that the Vault contains. Before we begin to discuss the major operation of the Texture Vault, it may be good to spend a moment to talk about the reason why organizing one's textures outside of their inventory or organizing anything outside of one's inventory has positive advantage back to that content creator. One of the main issues that can be had in any industry is lack of productivity due to searching for the resources that that creator needs. Oftentimes I've seen users who have their textures organized just in folders in their inventory get frustrated not being able to find a particular texture they're looking for, especially when it's nearly impossible to remember what the texture looks like based on the name, as many of the textures are undescript. In addition to that, some people use texture organizers. Now, the main problem with every texture organizer that exists on the market currently is that they have a limited amount of storage space. So you replace having all of your textures organized in folders to having multiple texture organizers in your inventory, all of which having approximately 13 folders that you can organize into. But it's very easy to forget in which device the particular texture you're looking for, a particular set of textures you're looking for exists. So you then spend time resing the different organizers, searching through them to find the particular instance of the textures that you're looking for, and again this wastes valuable time, keeping back your product from reaching the market, and in the end having you lose precious profit by them not being in the market. It was with these issues in mind that the Level 3 Texture Vault was created. With the Level 3 Texture Vault, not only are all of your textures located in one position, but you're able to organize the different canisters in any way that's most beneficial to you, the user. So you'll always be able to get back to the textures that you've organized, always be able to reference quickly different sets of textures, and save you the loss of that productivity that we mentioned earlier. Now that we've spoke a little bit about the theory of why one would want to organize their content outside of their Second Life inventory, let's go ahead and sink our teeth into the actual operation of the Texture Vault. The first thing we should talk about is permissions, since permissions are highly important to content creators who may have their Texture Vault in a location that's not 100% secure. The way that we bring up the permission subsystem is by first clicking on the main menu found in the lower left-hand corner. I'll do that now. And when we get our menu, we'll notice we have a number of options. We'll go ahead and just ignore those for the moment and focus just on permissions. So I'll click on the permissions button. And then you'll notice we have two groups of different permissions that we can set. The first group is the use group. Using defines who can browse the texture canisters that are within the vault, who can preload, who can load, and then who can browse the textures found within each canister. This permission set also defines who can full screen a particular texture and use the full screen options found on that texture. If we look at the different buttons here, we notice that within that group we have public, group, and owner use. Public use will allow anybody to come along and to use the interface as defined previously. Group use will limit the number of people who can use the interface down to those who belong to the same group that the Texture Vault itself has been set to. They will of course need to activate that group to be able to use the interface. And then we have the owner use, which limits the use of browsing only to the owner itself. If we look above that, we'll notice that we also have a grab group. Grab is just a synonym for downloading. So it follows the same exact parameters as the previous. So if we have it set to public grab, anybody will be able to download. If we set to group, it'll follow the same as the group use. And if we have it to owner grab, that means that only the owner will be able to download the textures from the particular canisters that we have loaded. Once we have our permissions set, we can go ahead and safely start using our Texture Vault. Let me go ahead and close out our menu here, and we'll bring up the freebie texture pack that we created in the previous tutorial. As you can see, we now have it loaded up. and we'll go ahead and load it onto the vault by clicking the load button. Now once we have the textures loaded onto the vault, we might want to focus our attention down to the two arrows that we see at the front interface there at the bottom. You'll notice that we have a left arrow and a right arrow. These two arrows are the main navigational buttons used to page through the different textures. We'll go ahead and do that now. I'll page to our right, which will give us our next page, and it'll load up for us, as you can see there, or we can page back. Now you'll notice that as we do this, the different buttons stay lit up. As the button's lit up, that's letting us know that the texture vault's still doing its work and that we may need to just wait a few moments before clicking any other buttons. However, if we do seem to either not see the button that's lit up, or we have maybe a little bit impulsive, if we double click it or we click it too early, we'll get a nice little message there at the bottom asking us to please wait. But through this functionality, we can rest assured that we're never going to break the interface simply by clicking on it too quickly, or some other SL hiccup that might impair our button clicking registration. Once we've gone through the different set of textures and we find a texture that we want to take a closer look at, we can get a full screen view of it easily just by clicking on the texture panel itself. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. As you can see, when we click on it and we bring it into our full screen mode, we get a button that exists between our two left and right arrows. That is our download button. So say we want to use this texture on one of our works, we just simply click that button, and you'll notice in the top right hand corner we'll be given an option to keep, discard, or to mute the texture vault. I don't actually need this particular texture, so I'm going to go ahead and click discard, but if you needed it, of course, you just click keep. Now once we have the texture in this full screen mode, we can start to use some of the full screen options. We pull up the full screen option menu by clicking the full screen button located in the lower right hand corner of the vault. I'll give that a click now. If we take a look at the different options we're presented, the first one we see there is info. Info is going to give us information about the full screen texture that we have there. I'll give it a click so we can kind of see what sort of information we're going to get back. As you can see, the information appears in the lower left-hand corner, but it also appears in your normal text chatting as well. We get our name of the texture, we get the creator of the texture, we get the permissions mask, and also the UUID. So if our goal is to get at the UUID of the texture without actually having to bring it to our inventory, through clicking the info button, we'll be able to get at that and never once have to worry about organizing the texture or pulling more content into our Second Life inventory. In addition to that, we have a number of different tiling options that we can use on the particular texture. I'll select tiling now. And here we see quite a vast array of different choices for our tiling. On our first row, we have our equidistant tiling. So we have a 2x2 tile, a 3x3 tile, or a 4x4 tile. In addition to that, we may want to get at information on how a particular texture performs being tiled in one direction. And as you can see, the top two rows will give us information on that. So we can go 1x2, 1x3, 1x4, or we can go 2x1, 3x1, or 4x1. Through these different choices, we should get a clear understanding of how this particular texture is going to work under different tiling situations, so we know exactly what we're getting before we pull it out of the vault. Other options that we can use on different full screen textures is that of the full bright. Oftentimes we want to have our textures have the full bright flag checked, or we won't even know that we need them to have the full bright checked until they're actually on an object. Well, this will help us to try to determine that by clicking it while it's on the texture vault to see if that's really what we want it to look like. And if you click it again, it of course will remove the full bright. In addition to the brightness settings, we can also predefine the different shininess